And I think here we are in that I'm waiting for it to catch up with its lag time, latency, and all of that. So, looks like we are live. So if you are on the recording or if you're coming in the middle of this introduction, welcome to the live stream. Glad to have you. Today we are moving into, presumably we'll be covering chapter 6 through chapter 8, verse 5 today. Now, I will say we have an exit ramp halfway through, give or take. So if we are running slowly through this section, I have a little bit of bonus time built in. The last chapter of this class is only on the second half of the last chapter of Revelation. So that can be shortened because that by the time we get to the end, things will be far more simple, especially the conclusion. I suspect that the authors, I haven't read through that far yet, but I suspect the authors of the study have left extra time for a concluding and kind of a post-remark sort of thing. And I'm fine smooshing that together if need be. So today we are moving past our initial vision, right? So the book starts with John on Patmos in chapter 1, and then he sees this image of the resurrected Christ who appears to him and takes him through this open door. The open door comes in, at the end of 3. And gives him a message for the 7 churches of Asia Minor, which, as we talked about, those 7 messages to the 7 churches are intended to be read and understood as for all churches across all time, right? So, yes, the letters were written to the church of Thyatira and Laodicea and other cities like that, but just like much of the Bible, they're intended for you as well. They're intended for us. Then John goes through this open door and what you might call the vision proper of Revelation begins, where all the spooky stuff starts happening, right? And we saw in chapter 4, we saw this image of the heavenly throne room with the Father and the Holy Spirit and those 24 elders, which were all the saints of all time, Old and New Testament. You're included in that, in the heavenly throne room, worshiping God. With all the angels and archangels and then those 4 weird beasts. Someone gave me another interpretation at the circuit meeting, and I completely forgot for those 4 beasts. Creatures. And it was a good one, too. But it's gone. So, like I said, if there's any part of Revelation that I got nothing for you, it's those 4 living creatures. I've not found a tremendously satisfying example, and I think a lot of the different arguments have a lot of merit. But no matter what they are symbolic of, they're leading this heavenly worship. Then in chapter 5, we see the ascension account from the viewpoint of heaven, right? Where the Lamb who had been slain with his 7 eyes and 7 horns appears, and he is the one who's worthy to open this scroll, right? The scroll that is in the Father's right hand that contains all the wisdom and knowledge of the Father, everything that is going to happen to his church on earth from the time of the ascension until the time of the return of Christ, which is the topic of the remainder of the book. And what we'll see, we just had a question beforehand about my argument that Revelation is a cyclical book. We're going to go through the whole cycle, an entire cycle today. We're going to watch as we encounter things that are occurring today, and we're going to see judgment. We will see the final judgment of mankind. The world will end before we are done today. Hopefully, just in the book. Although, Advent, we do pray, come Lord Jesus. So maybe it will happen in reality as well. But we will see the world end.
We said good.
Yeah, but if the world ends, I don't get to finish my study. Go ahead, Kate.
Did he get the information for all this in a vision?
John, yes. John sees all of this in a vision. So he is How exactly this works, we're not entirely
Not a
certain.
dream. He has a.
No, he is awake when this happens. This seems to be a full bodily incarnate vision. John is present and watching these things happen. Visions throughout the Bible take place in different ways. We see some of the prophets, the Lord speaks to them. Some of the prophets, the Lord shows them things. And so God chooses to reveal his prophetic word, and prophetic here just means the things he wants to tell his people, not necessarily the future, although we're going to hit technically future stuff today in different ways. Sometimes he speaks, sometimes he uses dreams, sometimes he shows visions. Of course, the greatest revelation of God comes in what form? Oh, come on, I taught you all Hebrews, you should know this. Through the incarnate word, through the incarnation, life, death, resurrection of his Son, of Christ, right? That is the totality of, right? I ask you guys this as often as I can, so I'm going to do it right now. We made a joke about it at Circuit, too. Jeff, what's the book of Leviticus about?
Wait, what? I didn't hear.
Jesus! Oh, he remembers. Right? Tom, what's the book of Genesis about? Jesus. Right? Kathy. Ezekiel. What's Ezekiel about? Jesus, right? The whole thing is about Jesus, right?
What about Hezekiah?
Hezekiah? That's a tricky one. The account of Hezekiah is about Jesus. Of course, there is no book of Hezekiah. Hezekiah appears primarily in the book of Isaiah. Right? He almost got me. I almost just kind of went with that one, too. Ooh, that was close. And so today we're going to see this vision of John that, again, what I want you to keep in mind is our frame of reference, our time frame for Revelation 6 through 8:5, kind of. The first vision has a transition period, but we'll talk about that. What is the start point of Revelation 6 historically? It is the ascension of Jesus, and the end point, the return, right? So this is, in a way, you could say this revelation that John sees, for at least for us, is past, is present, and is future. As such, what we want to avoid doing, and this is the pitfall that many people fall into in the book of Revelation. There are two, I think. One of them is, I got to look for the signs. I got to look outside, and you know what? I haven't seen any giant horsemen, right? There's no beast that's crawled out of the sea, so we're good. Jesus isn't about to come back, right? No, that's not how this works, right? This is symbolic, and it's not about particular events, right? Although there is a way to understand this, right? So, and it's a directional thing, right? Nothing we will read about today is about a particular moment in history. However, historical
Second
considerations.
paragraph of that historical.
Each of three visions in there.
No, the next paragraph.
The literary structure.
The paragraph starts the events of the story.
Thank you so much.
Steve, if I pop back up on the live stream.
It's like
Yeah.
the fifth line.
You're moving now.
I'm moving again. Okay, well, we're just going to keep going then, and we will figure all this out. So we run into all this post-trib, A-trib, amillennial stuff because people try and uncoil this spring. And what happens is, like I said, the world will end today in our class, right? Believe it or not. And yet, I'm not getting through the whole book, right? In fact, the world's going to end at least 2 more times before we're done. And a misunderstanding of how this is functioning is part of what causes a lot of this different weird rapture-esque, even though the rapture is not in the book of Revelation, period. That's Thessalonians. But I think it's Thessalonians anyway. Joe's not here, so he can't correct me. The world ends multiple times. So people are trying to figure this out. Well, I got an easier way, and we'll get there. And remember that this cyclical structure is intended for the purpose of giving different details. John, or God, will focus on different aspects of this tribulation, right? This tribulation that stretches from the ascension to the return of Christ, right? Just for our awareness here, today, our focus, this cycle's focus, the cycle of the 7 seals, the focus of this cycle is misery and suffering. By the way, that's going to be a common theme, that is caused by humanity. These are things that we do to ourselves because of sin. And that's going to be the emphasis. And I believe it's in the bowls.
So not supernatural events.
Right. No, nothing we're going to talk about today.
Disasters, people.
Well, for the most part, we're not talking about natural events of any kind. There's one that kind of spans the boundary, but we're going to look at the detail of why this is a man thing. And I believe it's the trumpets. We see how nature causes suffering. How creation itself is causing suffering for humanity.
That's right.
But that's not today. Today, our emphasis, this cycle, the emphasis is the suffering that man imposes on humanity. The suffering that we, in our fallen nature, have caused ourselves. Right? These are kind of the just desserts of our sinfulness and our rebellion. And let's not miss also what I personally think is one of the most hope-filled chapters in the entire Bible. One of my favorite chapters. It's chapter 7 specifically, but we will get there. So, for the sake of time, let's dive straight in, and then if we have more questions, we can kind of hit them as we go. May I have a volunteer to read? Thank you, Jeff. Chapter 6, verses 1 through 8, for perhaps the most famous portion of the book of Revelation.
Okay. I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. When the Lamb opened the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature say, "Come." Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword. When the Lamb opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine.
Through 8, please.
All through 8.
Yes, thank you.
When the Lamb opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over a 4th of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth.
All right, thank you. So we have the first of the 4 seals. Like I said, this is perhaps the most famous portion of the book of Revelation, partly because it makes for good paintings and good movie titles and good songs and things like that. Very dramatic, right? The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? By the way, Apocalypse is the name of this book in Greek, remember? This is the Apocalypse of John, right? The revealing is just what the word apocalypse means. By the way, we're going to